Hello everybody, it's Jack Caravanos, and I want to go over a presentation on how to produce good looking and effective PowerPoint presentations. And these are the topics I want to go over. We'll proceed with starting with big. And what do I mean by big? Well, a big mistake many people make is font size, and they choose different fonts, very often not really thinking twice about the different styles. And what you really want to do is maximize the area on the slide. The real estate of the slide is the most important. So don't go with small text. Try to maximize it to the biggest amount you can. And how do you estimate that? Well, essentially, there's a rule of thumb that you stand 6 feet away from your screen, and if you could read what you wrote, then you're in good shape. I would say that's a good rule of thumb. Whether it's of course, it depends on the size of your monitor, and I'm talking usually about a laptop-sized monitor. Okay, as far as text, keeping it simple is usually the best. Something like this drives people crazy, and while it may seem cute, it really is not very effective and just distracts from what you're trying to say. Also, too many fonts, too many styles, too many bold, italicized words sort of just confuses what the message is. You want the viewer to understand your content, not be distracted with this kind of thing. There is a rule that pretty much says the 6x7 rule. You could figure this out yourself. 6 lines per slide, no more than 7 words per slide. And you know how often this is violated when you go to presentations. People seem to type in the entire abstract on a slide and proceed to talk about it or lecture from it. So again, it's all keywords. And here's a good example of that. You'll see something like this. And the minute the instructor posts something like this, they don't even give you time to read it, and they're already talking about it. So they've really defeated the whole purpose. So if you're going to do something like this, just break it up into very simple steps. Instructional technology is a process. It involves people, procedures, and tools for solutions to problems in learning. That's exactly the message you wanted to give. And these bullet points, whether they're listed like this or whether they're highlighted in the text, that's what the reader is really going to come away with. All right. And of course, this is much simpler. What I don't want you to do, and tell other people the same thing, is not write full sentences. This is not grammar we're talking about. It's presentation and keywords and concepts. So you don't have to worry about past and present tense and sentence structure. You're not writing sentences. You're pretty much putting the bullet points, and then you'll talk about it. Now, representing data, very often I've seen many mistakes here. We've seen something like this where very often the instructor won't even give you a chance to digest this slide and already start talking about the implications. And if you're going to do something like this, you really want to do something that simplifies it greatly, like this. And by looking at it in millions, you see right away in expetise in July, it's 18 million leaves. Whereas if you were to try to get that from the previous slide, you would take at least 10, 20 seconds. Okay. And again, that's much simpler. Now, what about artwork? Well, we all like artwork. I use it extensively. I try to make it a habit of always putting a image on a slide. People like that, but don't go nuts with it, especially distracting things like this. It is about content, but very often a picture does speak 1,000 words, and people do want to look at something as you're presenting. So it does always support what you're doing. Now, what about sound? I don't use sound. I don't like sound, but it can be very distracting. If you are going to use it, think about how to use it effectively, usually a big dong. I don't know if you heard that, but something that pings and brings you right to a certain word or something. All right. What about transitions? I like transitions. Of course, you don't want to do something like this. It does drive people crazy. Usually transitions, simple appearing and disappearing are good, or dissolving in or fading in. I tend to use fading in and out or dissolving in and out. I sort of like those best. What's nice with transitions between slide to slide is one slide fades out while the other slide fades in. Okay? Animation, the same thing. Don't get too crazy with this. It could really distract and annoy people after a few slides like this. Something as simple as this would probably just be just as effective and to the point. And what about making it clear? And this is a mistake I see often. We have people that sometimes think if it's really important, put it in capital letters, but you see here capital letters are really hard to read. Lowercase letters are much easier on the eye, and it's all about quick interpretation of the information. So think twice about using capitals. And of course, most of the time people think you're screaming at them if you use capitals. Also the fonts, there's serif and non-serif, sans serif. Serif has cute little curls at the edges, and it's very pretty in reading. It's interesting that a serif font on paper tends to be easier to read, but a sans serif font is better for a computer screen. Go figure. That's why you'll see most books written with serif fonts that have sort of curled edges at the end and a little bit more stylish. But you know, serif fonts on the screen are difficult to read. Sans serifs are much clearer. Italics are sometimes very difficult to read on the screen. And of course, normal and bold fonts are just the best to use. So if you really want to make something stand out, choose bold. You may want to change the color of the bold if that's a word you want people to remember. Underlines can be good. Too often people think they may be hyperlinks, so be careful with that. I generally don't use hyperlinks, underlines like this, but I do use a lot of colors, and that really does help. Now, with regard to lists, we have a lot of possibilities here, and there's a difference between bullets and letters and numbers. And if you have a sequence, a process, like in this case, how do you put an elephant into a fridge? Well, you open the door, you put the elephant in, you close the door. 1, 2, 3, a logical sequence in sort of a either chronological order or linear fashion. If it doesn't have a sequence, don't use 1, 2, and 3. As a matter of fact, usually bullets work best here. But let me ask you, when should you use 1, 2, 3 versus an A, B, C? Some people just do that randomly. They go back and forth. But A, B, C are usually not sequential, but very often distinct topics. And then you want to go back to your audience, say, okay, as you could see in item B, blah, 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 blah. Whereas with bullets, you can't really direct the reader to a particular bullet. You would say, okay, the third bullet from the bottom says X, Y, Z. So anyway, be careful with 1, 2, and 3. Colors are very useful depending on how you use it, but be very careful where and what color. Be easy on the eye. Yellow on white is pretty bad. You could see that yourself. A color is very nice, and I would probably even make this a little darker depending where I am and how much light there's in the room. But be very careful of complementary colors, right? So something like this is very hard. It's almost painful on the eyes. And even this is a little too much color intensity. I would say, even though they do contrast, that green is just a little hard on the eye. And very often, I just think a simple white on black is very pretty and effective, especially if you're in a room with a lot of light and you don't, and you may have bleaching of the text. Okay, as far as images and size, usually size of the image dictates importance, so keep that in mind. I usually like images to be maximized. I don't like to see white space on a slide. Too many people just don't think about that, so they'll do something like this, and I say, well, why is there so much white space there? You've wasted real estate. And I particularly see it in situations like this, where someone pasted in a figure and not even realizing it's not just hard to read, but you have all this wasted space. Now, there's a couple of things going on with this slide. One is that it's, of course, difficult to read because the fonts are so thin and small, so from the back of the room you can't really see it. But you're also maybe not choosing the best template because everything on the left, from the word figure to the left, seems all wasted. And even if you blow it up like this, which is much better, and now people can at least see it, it still is wasting a fair amount of real estate on the left. And I would say something like this may just look better this way. Notice maximizing the space. It even gives you room to make a comment there in that white space in the middle, and it does look good. So be very careful in choosing your templates and maximizing that space. Okay, as far as focal points, very often you have a slide and you start talking about it and you mention the stream. As you can see, the stream is polluting a larger stream, blah, blah, blah. But you really do want to point, so this way you direct the eye of the viewer to a specific point. Otherwise, they're saying, oh, gee, where is he? Can he swim in that water? What kind of water is that? Oh, it's pretty clean. Oh, I think it's in Peru. And you want to, again, bring the attention to the person. By the way, notice this slide is sort of not very high resolution. And there is a dilemma with high resolution. You have very large files. But space and file size tends to be easy to get to these days. So I would say get your best picture out there and post it. In this particular case, it was a smaller picture, and I enlarged it. And that's why it sort of got bleached out of sorts. And then we have progression. Very often you have a slide like this and you want to describe technology and you want to equate it to a toilet or a bathroom. And it seems kind of crazy, but you could talk about the function key and which of those is the function key and the debugger and the backup system. But if you do it like this, where you say, okay, we have the mouse, and there's a little mouse there. That's just a cute slide. And then we have the main storage is the toilet tank. The function key is the handle. The software is the paper. The floppy disk is this, on and on and on. So notice here you could teach this whole concept directing the learner to particular points. So even if people forgot what sequence you're in, they could quickly catch up on all of this stuff. The debugger is a plunger, and the backup system is the cup of water. So this could be a lot of work producing a slide like this, but they are very effective, especially if you're going to reuse presentations. Anyway, be consistent in some of these bullet points. We have something like this is fairly blah, just bullet points. You don't know which is most important, but if there's one that is most important, give it a little extra mark. But don't mix things up, because now you've sort of confused the reader which one is the most important by using different bullets. So the key here is consistency throughout the entire document, not just the slide, the entire document. And the same thing goes with colors. If you're going to use green, then use green throughout. Don't keep switching back and forth. And notice the blue on white just does not work. So some final words. Communication is key. That's what it's all about. Of course, it has to look good and flow logically, but you are trying to get all this information to the viewer very quickly and simply. Text supports communication, pictures to simplify complex concepts, animations for complex concepts. If you're building up to something and you want to explain it, you could use that sort of technique. And of course, the visuals support the document, not really distracting. And again, I tend to not use sounds. By the way, notice in this particular one, as one bullet point came up, the other one went gray, was shaded out. This is a nice technique, so it forces people to stay with what you're talking about and not let their eye wander. Okay, and that's the end of this particular presentation, at least part one. And notice people always like an email or a phone number somewhere on there. So do not forget to put something on your presentations and your titles or whatever you need. All right? Very good.